Okay, thank you for tuning into Stampscaping 101. I didn't make a card and mount this up like I usually do, but I just wanted to do a quick video today, just finishing up one of the compositions that I did in the previous video. Added roughly four shades of blue into the scene. Cool colored scheme, of course, and just one additional image in the form of the cloud with the moon, just kind of introducing the illuminated source within the composition to kind of work around. Creating a passage of light in the scene, but kind of creating a little bit of oscillation between lights and darks throughout there. It's not good to just have a big area of, no color at all. It kind of looks a little bit strange. So we have objects and areas within the composition, darker areas like shadows and whatnot. And then for me, what's really fun is going back in and adding the translucency and opacity with the color box pigment ink applied in very thin layers to create kind of a illuminated fog, and specific little highlights using a white gel pen create sparkle and an additional reiteration of the light source in the form of tiny little dots on trees, rocks, and the snowy terrain. So, hope you enjoy the video, and thanks again for tuning into Stampscaping 101. Okay, we're going to finish off this composition that I did in the previous video using the Country Chapel small set, and just kind of mixing it up a little bit and adding this snowy imagery down below. I wanted to make this into a kind of a nighttime moonlight reflecting off the snow type of scene. So I'm going to add in the cloud with moon image into the mix. It's going to be generally a cool tone scene, so my theory is with the as far as the color scheme in a scene, if you have the illuminating source within the scene itself, to do that image in that same color scheme. So in this case I'm going to use one of my Memento blues here, and it could be any one of them. The lighter I stamp it, though, in a scene, when I start layering in additional colors, the lighter it is, the more prone it is to kind of being I don't know, kind of eliminated in terms of the imagery with the additional tones. So the lighter it is, the more colors you run into it, you might not be able to see the actual image as well, which could be fine though, because if you want this to look like it's really emitting a lot of light, then you can do it in that lighter tone. You just have to be a little bit more careful not to run over the impression with the too dark of the additional colors that you add. Okay, so I think I'm just going to go with a medium tone blue here. Alright. Now I'm going to tweak this a little bit, okay? I'm going to take and I'm going to blot off the edge with a dry paper towel, okay? And I think I'm going to, I want it to be a soft light, so I'm just going to give it a little bit of a head start by taking off some of the ink around the moon figure within there. Okay, like that. And this is about how much ink I've removed from the image. Okay. If I want that moon to look like it's coming up from that horizon line, then what I'll do is I would mask it off and then stamp it like that. But I think I want the moon to be somewhat up here, maybe kind of about like so. It kind of has this little brook in here kind of going up this way, and it's kind of leading the viewer's eye up to that source of light, so it keeps this nice diagonal in here. Okay. Alright, now let's bring in some additional tone. If you have a range of values in a given color scheme, in terms of the process of adding that color, I would typically start with the lightest color. Mementos are kind of a thick, slippery ink, so you can apply it very liberally, and you don't have to worry about the ink kind of setting up in a leaf or oval shape and not being able to spread. Okay. Now I'm using glossy paper here, so it allows me to kind of move it around. You can see if it's on a matte paper like this, it will set hard and fast because it's being absorbed. So if you want to use it in a much lighter fashion, then what you want to do is, you just kind of adjust your movement and tap it around kind of in a light application or pressure. Okay. Now, if this is going to be kind of a illuminated landscape here, meaning kind of reflected snow, I probably don't want to go too dark with the tones that I apply down here, but this is just the light blue, so I am going to get some of that down. I don't want it to be too stark white. And I think in terms of a night sky, I think I'll have some of the, I'll try to at least have some of the water, that little creek, kind of being illuminated by the light. So I'll kind of watch where I apply this ink. But like I said, I don't want it to be just so stark white it looks kind of funny if I did that, or when I do that. So it's good to get a little bit of color down, especially in your lightest of tone. This is Memento Summer Sky. I'm adding a lot of tone at the base of these trees because the moonlight is shining on them and they are casting a shadow there, so the base of the tree will get a good amount. Same like down here. Let's say the moonlight's coming from here, so let's say this chapel is kind of casting a shadow this way. So these first colors, kind of establish the lighting scheme of a scene. Okay, this chapel would most likely not be illuminated, or wouldn't be illuminated very much. Of course, you can light your scene any way you want, but I'm going to apply some tone on the side of the chapel. And where you run into kind of all these other little trees coming out of the snow, I'll put a little tone on them and at the base of them, so it looks like they're opaque and thus casting shadows again. Okay, same thing down here on these rocks, we can get a little bit of tone on them. Okay, creating a little bit of separation between sky and reflected light. I'll try to make those clouds back there a little bit darker. If you want to, you can kind of create a bit of a mask right like that. If you want to create a more definitive separation between those two areas. And as you can see, I mean, even where I have some of this summer sky blue, I keep adding more to really get a good saturation of ink on the surface of the paper. And if it can get darker using an existing color, well, not existing, if it can get darker using the present color, I add more, but then when it just is not going to get any darker using that value, then I move on to my next value. If you can, try to, have a range of tones. I think it's easier, but if you have to move from something like really light to something fairly dark like that, then just take it nice and slow. So that you have a lot of nice control over the amount of ink that you lay down. Okay, it's a fairly dark blue. Now, the amount of time that I spent with that lightest color, you won't have to spend that amount of time, with your medium and darker tones. First of all, because you don't have to, the first color is kind of establishing a bit of a saturation on the page. You're kind of getting the page somewhat moist, and that's not really you won't have that need with your darker tones because it's already been established with the lighter ones. So the medium tones, darker tones, they glide across the page much easier if you have that kind of surface established in terms of the moisture content of the paper. Okay, let's see. I'm going to try to get in here and get in this water a little bit. I think I want that snow to stand out a little bit more. So I'm going to try to get some tone in there, like that. Okay, so I have that little water going in there, and it makes that seem a little bit lighter by contrast. Okay, hit some shadows around some of these trees. At the base of the tree, around the chapel. It's going to create some more shadows on the chapel itself, hopefully making it look a little bit more three-dimensional in terms of using having a change in values from one side of the object to the other. And also, I'm taking my cues from the design itself. There's some shadows on it, so I'm just kind of reiterating those shadows with additional tone, additional value. Okay. Okay, that's good. Let's go up in the sky. Add more in the sky. Getting some additional tone in here. I think it was just too wide open of an area in terms of that light white of the paper. There might have been some of that summer sky in there, but it's so light you couldn't really see it too well. So adding a shadow to these trees down here. I'm kind of using just the tip of my applicator sponge. Now, if there's some areas that are just so fine and you can't get into, I mean, you can use things like Q-tips or something like that, to get in there. Let's see. I'm going in and getting some of these rocks and then adding some tone into that waterway. This tip right here is not very juicy and wet, which is good. My pads are somewhat medium to kind of dry. Okay. Let's go with Danube Blue. I thought I'd use the mementos because I just got some bad news, crafting bad news, I should say, and that's that the Ranger Adirondack inks have been discontinued. They'll continue to sell, Ranger will continue to sell their inventory, their remaining inventory, until they're out. So, depending on what time you might be coming across this video and checking it out, really determine just how much of that remaining stock is still available. I picked up, I just placed an order with them for additional inks and pads, re-inkers and pads. For me, it's really it's the re-inkers. It's the Adirondack Lights colors and re-inkers that are a really formidable media to have in your repertoire, because they're so light. I'm wondering if there's ever going to be another kind of really light in value hue range from any ink company, so I don't know, we'll see. But I did look over Ranger's, I don't know, I didn't look at like every pad company out there, but I looked at some of the other colors from Ranger, and I think there's other colors that'll work for us. So I'll try to get around to testing those out at some point in time. Just in terms of the value range, having those lighter tones. For our initial colors that we use in this process, this color layering process. Okay, now I'm going to take the sky and make it really dark. Okay. Someone suggested that in one of my previous videos on stamp board, and I thought, oh yeah, maybe that sky should have been black and not blue. I like to go in with the blue under this black anyway, because I think in the end, rather than just going straight black up here, I think this will make a much more rich hue in the end by having that tone underneath the black. Okay. Let's add a little bit of this black in the bottom left and right corner, just as kind of a tool to a device, visual device of vignetting. Okay, adding a little bit of shadow to the base of these trees. Same thing down here in this corner. Kind of a vignette using black. Okay. The sky, as it stands right now, I don't like that color. I want it. It's not as deep and rich as I prefer, so let's go with an additional inks. Let me try this Marvy number 3 blue. The Adirondack Denim would be great. Just usually people have some sort of like a navy blue, kind of a dark blue pad in their collection. Go ahead and use one of those types if you have it. And yeah, that looks better. Just a deeper, richer color scheme, I think, for that area of our scene. Same thing, hit it in the shadows, those darker tones. Okay. A little bit more vignetting with color. I'm looking at this, and visually to me, I feel like it needs something, kind of a stronger framing device here in the foreground. I think I might add an additional image in there. I'm thinking about these kind of larger spruce tree that we have. Okay, but before that, let's take a look at the potential use of some alcohol pens. Going with the light blue one, this is the Marvy La Plume Permanent alcohol-based pen. And I can really get into specific areas with this. Going on my rocks, because rocks, unless they're covered in snow, but I'm not coloring the snow portion of it, they wouldn't reflect as much light, so I'm making them darker. Darker than the snow that's around them. And I can get into very specific areas. Right along the banks of that little brook. At the base of rocks. As shadows from the trees. This color right here is very light. I don't know what the name of it is. Whenever I'm getting pads, or if I were thinking about getting pads, if I didn't have pads yet, one of the things I would start off with as far as a collection of pads is I would have your primary colors in very light values, meaning some sort of pink, some sort of blue, and some sort of yellow. I know pink isn't the primary, but it's the lighter version of red. So you can use those primaries as kind of the base for a lot of different color schemes. You can mix your blue and yellow together for a green colored scheme, like in grass or something like that, or in some rolling hills. Of course, pink and red would form, pink and yellow would form the oranges, and blue and pink would be your violet tones. Okay, going into this water area. Alright, now if you want a little bit of temperature around your moon, you can certainly add it with some ink. Going back to Adirondack Lights, add a little bit of yellow in here or something like that, but I'll tell you what, let's try to add a little bit with an alcohol-based pen. This is kind of a very light in value tan color. Add a little bit around my moon. So the moon's slightly warm. And I'll add some of this warm tone, very light in value, on some of these areas that I've retained some of the lightness of the paper. Okay. I don't know if that's reading on the video, but there's just a pale, warm kind of color scheme going through this passage of light right here that I've left. Okay, now going back to the foreground element that I said was kind of missing for me. I'm going to go get that, and I will be right back. Okay. You have the twisting pine and spruce. I'm going to try and decide which one I want in here. This one's kind of speaking to me more than that one. In the spirit of scenic stamping, I'm just going to use a small portion of the stamp for my needs. And don't have to ink up the whole thing. Okay, this is going to be on the side here. And let's go for another impression. Something just to kind of add in the foreground to frame things off a bit. Okay. And how about another one on the side here to kind of balance off those impressions a bit. Okay. It's a little bit better, I think, in terms of framing and composition. I was looking at this, I need a little Arctic fox or something like that running through there. I don't know, future design perhaps. Alright, let's get some different effects in here. Let's add some pigment ink on a Q-tip. A lot of people have questions about this technique. We start off with like a real cotton swab here, like that, but that's a little bit too tight, okay? So I'm going to take that and kind of fray it a bit. Those acrylic swabs are a little bit too tightly wound, okay? So I really want to get this loosened up like this. I'm pulling this out a little bit like that and opening it up a touch. Okay, so that's what we have right now. It's really pretty loose. The stick goes to about right here, and this is all just kind of frayed, loosened fibers. Okay. Now, depending on how inked up your pigment is, this is the Colorbox Frost White pigment ink. From what I remember, this pad's fairly wet. It's kind of new, okay? So I don't want to get too much ink on there. I'm kind of being careful about not to push this in there too hard, okay? Take that, and this is what I'm going for. I'm going to smash. See, that's too much. You wouldn't want to use that as an applicator with that amount on there. So be sure and just kind of blot it off like this. Okay, now I'm watching that, and when it kind of gets to the consistency that I want, see that right there? This over here looks a lot different than that, right? So this is what you want. It still needs to be a little bit taken off. Okay, now watch this right here. See that? See how little is being applied? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. 17 taps, and it looks like that. That's a lot more control. And also I have it, I'm tapping very lightly. Okay. Let's start applying. I like to do this mist at the base of trees or something like that. Trees are dark, and Kind of looks a little bit blotchy still to me like this. But remember, part of this process of application is really equally about subtraction. So I just take my finger and I just kind of dab off some of that ink sometimes if it's like a little bit blotchy. But the tip right here, the more I tap it off, it kind of gets into the consistency that I want, you know. The more it gets smashed down. Okay, hitting some of this area here at the base of trees, you know, where it can look like a little bank of fog like that. See that area right around there? I kind of hit that tree right there, because it's the side of the tree that's kind of facing the light. We have this tree right here. It has very crisp edges, right? Well, let's soften it up a little bit to where it looks like the branches are now being illuminated by the moon. Okay. See that right there? The difference between this one and that one? You just go on the edge a little bit where it's capturing that moonlight. Let's do the same thing for those two little trees up there. Looks real similar because I almost stacked it, you know, vertically right on top of one another. So let's change the look of these ones. These ones are closer to the moon too, so in terms of their positioning within the composition. Okay, so I subdued them a little bit and oops, put them in a kind of a bank of fog, I guess. Okay, edge of this tree right here on the side of the moonlight. Let's give that a little bit of a touch with the pigment ink. Okay, so hopefully it looks a little bit more three-dimensional with that little bit of pigment ink on that side. To see it's very light in terms of the coverage. Base of some trees over here. There's a little bit of light over there. If it was really dark, I probably wouldn't add too much of that. Okay. So let's say some of that moonlight is coming from behind these trees and illuminating it down here. Maybe there's a little bank of fog. Okay, that kind of brought that little area to life right around here. And now let's bring some down into this this brook. The brook look is okay, but it's kind of all the same texture, so let's put a little bit of fog and implied lighting. Implied meaning there's some mist in the air, and when you add this effect, you're saying basically through visual means that that fog or that moisture in the air is being illuminated by the light within the scene. Ooh, I need to really blot that off. It just re-inked. There's so much on there. Kind of turning that object into space with the use of light. When I say turning, of course I don't mean physically turning, but kind of optically by making that side of it lighter. This area is darker, it looks a little bit more three-dimensional that way. You can see where that used to be very dark right there. It was as dark as this one, but just kind of putting it in a little bit of a bank of fog down there, it really softens up that area. So it creates a visual contrast between really everything in here. When we're talking about stamping imagery, I mean, hopefully we're getting nice crisp impressions. We don't want blurry impressions, right? Unless it's some sort of effect that you're going for, like taking a stamp, making an impression and twisting it as you do it, or something like that to create movement. But for the most part, you know, we generally want nice crisp impressions, but that leaves us with kind of one texture. And this is a way to go back in and add additional texture, softness into an otherwise very crisp, hard edge medium of, you know, rubber stamps. You can do this on other things too. I mean, like I said in, I think, a previous video I mentioned, you know, you can stamp out a word stamp and, you know, if you have a lighting source in it, or just on all your letters, kind of just put a little bit of tone or pigment ink over the top of it or whatnot, and make it look like it's being illuminated from one direction or another, bottom lit, top lit, just by changing the you know, the relative lightness of the letter form. Okay. Let's pull out our white gel pen. Should be pretty effective in a dark scene. This one's a Choose Pilot. Choose. Let's see if it works as good as our Signo Uniballs, and it appears to be flowing just fine. I'm adding some highlights into those trees on the side of the tree that's facing the moonlight, thus reiterating in kind of texture, form, lighting direction. On this tree, I'll put the highlights, you know, on the right side, because the moonlight is coming from the right. On this side of the scene, we'll put our highlights on the left side of the tree. For the most part, I mean, you know, I'll put some additional little sparkles or highlights here and there just to kind of make it balanced off. I don't want it to look like there's a string of Christmas lights or something like that on one side of the tree. It kind of looks strange like that, so. But we'll put the bulk of them somewhere where it will kind of add to our lighting scheme. Okay, how about down here in the water? You know, we have these little sparkles in the water. Some specular light reflecting the moonlight. And we'll put a little bit of additional snow. We'll reclaim some of the snow where I've kind of gone over it too much with the tone, just because I couldn't avoid it using that larger applicator. But You can kind of always go back and reclaim some of that with a specific tool, such as, you know, a ballpoint pen in a gel pen format. Okay. Let's see if I can bring you back down a little bit closer here. And I will try to remember to keep where I'm working in the field of view. How about some glistening snow too? So in this little blue area where I've added the shadows, I'll kind of add a little bit of texture into that in the form of just a few dots. Which is kind of nice. All of these designs have been rendered for the most part with little black dots, you know, and it seems like kind of going full circle. You're kind of adding its complement, you know, in the form of a white dot to finish the scene. So everything's kind of in balance in a way. Okay, this little area down here is somewhat of a kind of a muddy mess with a little bit of tone. So let's go in here and bring in some additional white to kind of just along the ridge of it. How about down here too? I think I might like some of this. You can add quite a bit of this white like this, the way I'm doing. I'm not being very careful at all, just because this is supposed to be like patches of snow anyway, so. Okay, I think that should do it here. Maybe a couple more here and there, but for the most part, I think this is done. Anyway, kind of a simple composition, kind of fun to do in terms of the finish work on it. It's a really simple color scheme, you know, just various a range of values of blue, a little bit of warmth in there too. The sponging method for the general, the alcohol-based pen for the specific areas, make a good combination to work with as far as your color applications go, and the opaque work in the form of the color box frost white and the white gel pens to add texture and visual interest. Okay, thanks for watching, and hope you enjoyed the finishing of this composition.